Long before lighters, matches or ferro rods, humans mastered the art of creating fire in a world where, honestly, failure meant freezing to death. But what's often overlooked is that the Neanderthals, those so-called primitive cousins of ours, weren't just fumbling with sticks in caves. They were expert firemakers who built flames that burned longer, hotter and more efficiently than, well, many modern campfires. Archaeological evidence now shows they used mineral chemistry, controlled oxygen flow, and prepared tinder in ways that reveal a startling truth. Neanderthals weren't just surviving the Ice Age. They were mastering it. Today we're digging into the fire-starting secrets of the Neanderthals, showing how they built dependable flames in freezing climates and how those same methods can still be applied by modern survivalists, homesteaders or, anyone who values ancient fieldcraft. Neanderthals treated fire not as luck, but as a craft of chemistry and patience. For years, early archaeologists believed Neanderthals only used fire they found, lightning strikes, forest burns, or volcanic embers. But newer excavations across Europe and the Middle East have shattered that myth. Charred birch bark, iron pyrite traces, and consistent hearth sites reveal something different. They made fire on demand. In caves like Pech de Lazay in France, archaeologists discovered layers of hearths built over centuries, each with controlled ash thickness, indicating reuse and maintenance. These weren't random blazes, they were engineered. The real clue came from microscopic traces of manganese dioxide, a black mineral Neanderthals collected and ground into powder. When added to wood shavings or dry grass, it drastically lowered the ignition temperature of the material. In other words, they were creating their own primitive fire accelerant, 200,000 years before modern chemistry discovered the same principle. By mixing powdered manganese with embers or sparks struck from flint and pyrite, Neanderthals could ignite fires even in damp or freezing conditions. This was not guesswork, it was skill refined through observation and repetition. Their fire-starting method combined mineral science with natural materials. Neanderthal firecraft likely began with iron pyrite, also called fool's gold, and sharp-edged flint. When struck together, these minerals produce hot sparks, hotter even than modern steel and flint combinations. Archaeologists have found fire-marked pyrite nodules alongside flint flakes in Neanderthal campsites, confirming that this was a deliberate pairing, not coincidence. The process went something like this. They would strike the pyrite against flint over a tinder base, often made of dried grass fungi like tinder fungus, foams fermentarius, or scraped bark from birch and pine. The resulting sparks would catch on the tinder's fibrous surface. Once a glow appeared, they carefully fed it with fine wood dust or dried moss, materials that burned slowly but retained heat, acting as natural coal extenders. This method was especially valuable in cold climates, where humidity made ordinary tinder unreliable. Neanderthals didn't have the luxury of dry kindling. They created it, preparing fire kits days in advance by drying materials near hearths or in woven skin pouches tucked under clothing. It's an early example of logistical thinking that, honestly, modern survivalists still rely on. preparation over improvisation. Neanderthal hearths show remarkable consistency in shape and layering. Most were shallow depressions lined with stones or compacted clay, simple but effective windbreaks. Ash layers were often left in place between burns, acting as insulation and heat reflectors. This created a kind of primitive thermal battery that could reignite with minimal effort, using just a spark and a bit of new fuel. Instead of wasting energy building new fires, they preserved old embers by covering them with ash overnight, a trick still used in bushcraft to maintain coals until morning. This banking technique allowed a Neanderthal to restart a fire with minimal sparkwork the next day, even in freezing weather. Their fuel choices were equally deliberate. Evidence from charred remains shows they preferred hardwoods like oak and birch, which produce long-lasting coals rather than quick flames. They even used resin-rich pine knots for starting fires in damp conditions, as the sap content helped sustain combustion. It's worth noting that these same principles are still relevant for anyone building a fire in harsh conditions today. If you can't get dry tinder, find resinated wood or carry birch bark. It burns even when wet. Bank your fire overnight by covering it with ash, and you'll have embers waiting in the morning. Neanderthal wisdom still applies perfectly in the modern wilderness. If you want to replicate this ancient method today, the steps are remarkably straightforward but require practice. Start by finding two key materials, a piece of flint and a pyrite or marcasite stone. When struck together, they release a shower of hot sparks, but unlike steel, these sparks are tiny and short-lived. That means your tinder must be exceptionally fine and dry. Use materials that mimic what Neanderthals had: fungus, dry moss, shredded bark, or finely ground charcoal dust. If you can find a little manganese dioxide, sometimes found in black mineral veins or battery scrapings, though really never used from modern waste in the wild, it can help lower the ignition point, just as it did for them. When striking, angle the pyrite against the flint and aim the sparks onto your tinder bundle. Once a glow forms, cup it gently in your hands and blow softly until it flares. Add thin slivers of wood, no thicker than matchsticks, and gradually build upward. You'll quickly realize, just how much skill and patience these early humans possessed. In modern bushcraft, the lesson is clear. Redundancy in firemaking isn't about fancy tools, it's about technique and materials. If your lighter fails or your ferro rod breaks, knowing how to work with mineral friction could honestly mean the difference between comfort and exposure. The most powerful thing about Neanderthal firemaking isn't the spark, it's the mindset. They lived in environments where every flame was earned, where honestly one careless night could mean death by cold. Their approach to fire shows an understanding that survival depends on rhythm and observation, not speed. By studying how they worked with natural chemistry and environmental cues, we gain more than practical lessons. We gain perspective. Fire wasn't just warmth or light, it was continuity. Archaeological hearths show the same spots used across generations, suggesting that fire connected families, taught skills, and preserved identity. It's no coincidence that even now every survivalist soldier or explorer treats fire as the heart of any camp. That mindset began with people we once underestimated. Neanderthal fire. Starting secrets remind us that survival isn't about gear. It's about understanding. Their mastery of minerals, moisture control and patience made them far more advanced than history once gave them credit for. These weren't brutes in caves. They were engineers of necessity, chemists of the earth and teachers of the flame. If this deep dive into ancient firecraft sparked your interest, subscribe to Echoes of Valor for more explorations into humanity's oldest technologies and survival traditions. Share this with a fellow history enthusiast or fieldcraft student. Because the next time you strike a spark in the wilderness, you're continuing a skill that began not with modern man, but with the Neanderthals who first turned survival into an art.